Welcome to Southwest Florida Real Estate Update, hosted by area realtor Jim York and York Real Estate Group of Frye Realty. Our show will bring you the most up-to-date information about the local real estate market, featuring leading experts in the real estate field.
Hi, I'm Morgan York with York Real Estate Group, and welcome to Southwest Florida Real Estate Update. Today we have our host Jim York and his guest Chris Mitchell, owner of Brightway Insurance.
Thank you, Morgan, for the introduction. Well, Chris Mitchell. Here we are. We just post-hurricane, and Irma just came through last week, and we're going to devote this whole show on helping people understand what kind of insurance they need or what they need to do when a hurricane hits the community, which is not that often. It's once in 10, 15, 20 years or 30 years. Mm-hmm. So before we get into the show and start going through the topics that we have here, tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience.
Well, I'm I'm an agency owner with Brightway Insurance. We've obviously been busy with these claims, right. And we focus primarily on personal lines. So obviously we have a lot of experience in dealing with this type of situation.
And where's your offices located?
We're in Daniels Parkway,
mm-hmm.
right on 75.
Well, you can help anybody in the state of Florida, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Right. Okay, the first question a lot of people are asking us, and I got them listed here, okay, is how do they prepare before a hurricane for insurance purposes if they're going to, file a claim, or hopefully they don't have any damage?
Well, as far as preparing your home is concerned, there's several things you want to do. If you have hurricane shutters, you obviously want to put those up. A lot of folks who don't have hurricane shutters are buying plywood, putting some of those over their window. You also want to, if you're in a higher hazard flood zone sometimes, even those that weren't, sometimes you may want to try to elevate things like personal belongings, memorable things from your life. Elevate those on your bed or on top of a closet or something in the event of a flood. Now, before you leave your home, you absolutely want to make sure you've got a copy of your policy, because in our situation when we had so many evacuated, a lot of folks didn't bring their policy. They didn't know their coverages, the phone number, anything like that.
And what we did, we evacuated, but not very far. We went to a friend's house, a client really, a bunch of us got together in one house that was just recently built. Mm-hmm. We also put all our stuff away, in different areas, like even our personal stuff, like jewelry or whatever, because you can only take so much with you. Yeah,
and the other things to consider too are perhaps turning off the water, turning off some breakers.
Okay.
Because if power does go down, when it's coming back up, there can be a lot of surges. And of course, if you have some type of water main issue and the water isn't turned off, you can have a significant problem. So those are some other things to consider before you leave.
Yeah, and the other thing that you should do is once the hurricane is over, it's good to get the shutters down just in case there is a fire, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
absolutely.
Okay. The next thing we're going to ask you is filing claims. Okay. Now that we've gone through it, and people are asking, how do I file a claim? They're calling the broker or the insurance agent. They're trying to get adjusters out. Should they clean up their property, or should they leave it the way it is? Or just give us a little background on what the procedure is on that.
Well, in the event you find your home is damaged, carriers want you to take precautionary steps to mitigate further damage. So if you've got a water leak, for example, they want you to go to call a water remediation company, a contractor, whoever you need to do to stop that leak, for example. But outside of that, if you have other damages, for example, your pool cage is damaged, you have a leak somewhere else where you're trying to figure out where it is, your cabinets might be wet. You really don't want to start doing those repairs before talking to the adjuster itself. As far as filing the claim is concerned, in those types of situations, a catastrophe, the best, most efficient way to do it is really to call your carrier directly to actually get it filed in their system. Now, there are sometimes, many of them now obviously have sites online where you can quickly file the claim and document it. That's typically the best thing to do. And then, of course, if you have questions, you would certainly call, whoever your agent is, for example, and ask these various questions. With regards to a hurricane claim, it isn't necessarily a bad thing. So filing the claim, because carriers consider that an act of God. So when you do file that claim, they are looking at that as it's out of your control. There wasn't any sort of negligence or liability there, and you can have someone come there and perhaps, in addition to identify all your damage, they might find things that you aren't even aware of, because that's what they're trained to do. So it's very rarely a bad idea to file a claim. I mean, if you think that the only thing you see is maybe a couple screens down on your pool cage, something like that, it may not be worth your while. But if you've got some perhaps roof damage, some leaking somewhere, it's probably best to file that claim.
And when the adjuster comes out, it's been on TV, should they sign off on that claim, or should they leave that open?
Well, typically if you, for example, get a remediation company, they have, some of them use what's called assignment of benefits, and you really want to stay away from signing that form if that's what they're looking for you to sign, because it takes any kind of legal rights away from you, and they handle the claim. It sounds very, easy to ease the process,
right,
but ultimately it can actually cause more complications and delay your claim being handled. So you really don't want to sign off on those types of documents. Now, in this situation with adjusting firms, they're obviously swamped. You have to factor in Hurricane Harvey that hit Texas, and some of those adjusting firms were down there.
That's right.
So they're shorthanded, and so what we're seeing, and it's not the fault of the carrier, because they typically have adjusting firms they hire to go do this. We're seeing issues where perhaps people were filing claims day of Hurricane Irma, and the adjuster has yet to go out to the house. It's been 10 days, and some of them might not be getting out there for another 2 weeks, because they have to try to determine the severity of some of these. If you've got maybe a leak that you've secured, and maybe some exterior damage that's not a big deal, versus someone who has a hole in their roof and obviously has tens of thousands of dollars of damage, they're going to tend to prioritize those. So, you have to keep that in mind when you're going through a situation like this.
So don't stress out.
Right, try to keep relaxed.
Okay, the next question I have is, we've had some clients that are going to try and get their roofs repaired, or whatever the problem might be. So do they need to get a licensed contractor to fix that?
Absolutely. So when in situations like this, there are companies called storm chasers.
Right, that's what I told them.
And they descend into the state. And while some of them are licensed, a lot of them aren't. And what can happen is, they aren't familiar with Florida building codes.
Right.
So they aren't doing it. And then in the long run as well, in addition to that, it can actually cost you quite a bit of money just from a home insurance perspective. Because in Charley, which was the last major hurricane that caused this extensive a damage, we had a lot of companies that replaced roofs, and that was in 2004. And they didn't pull the required permits, and so customers are losing that discount on their home insurance, and that can be several $100s a year.
Yeah, I just told a client that yesterday. He was ready to sign.
Yeah.
And we were talking, and I said, don't sign anything. Make sure they're permitted, et cetera.
Yeah.
And he says, "Are you sure?" I said, that's the way it was with Charlie, you follow me? But,
absolutely.
So I said, you'll never get the discount, and people just paid that money and never received the discount.
May not be up to codes. I mean, Florida codes
Right.
for hurricanes is very different than other states that aren't affected by that. So
I even had voicemails on my phone from people from Ohio about roofs, that we can come down and fix it. I mean, we're in the area of the Monday through whatever it was, so it's pretty interesting, like you said, storm chasers.
Yeah, it creates an interesting situation.
Chris, we're going to take a little short break, and we're going to be back in 1 minute here. Thank you.
Thinking of buying or selling a home in Naples, Marco, Bonita, or Estero, Florida? Think of the most experienced York real estate group associated with the #1 brokerage in Naples, Downing Frye Realty, which produced $1.9 billion in sales in 2014, controlling 43% of all transactions in Naples. Jim, Michael, and Morgan York make up the York Real Estate Group of Downing Frye Realty. With over $250 million in sales transactions, they can offer you the expertise and trust you want and need in a realtor. Call them today at 239-273-6727 or visit their website, www.naplesyorkrealestate.com.
Welcome back. Chris, everybody wonders what's What is covered when you have a damage like this?
Well, obviously, somewhat of it depends on the type of policy you have.
Right.
So it's always important to review your policy, and certainly like anything else, you're busy. You may not take time to look at the policy, and which is understandable. You got a lot of other things going on, but so in Florida, obviously hurricanes, that's a huge portion of your coverage. Now, if you have a mortgage, you have to have that coverage.
Right.
Okay. So obviously you want to make sure of that. But if you bought your home, without a mortgage, then you obviously aren't required to have insurance. So you want to check that. Now, within that hurricane coverage, you want to check what the deductible is, because a normal standard deductible on a home policy is 2%, and that is 2% of what the dwelling is insured for. So if your house costs $300,000 to rebuild, it's 2% of that is $6,000.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are companies that go lower than that, but it creates it's pretty prohibitive to raise the premium.
They're higher too.
Yeah, they're also higher, up to 5%.
That's what I heard.
So you want to know what you have. Within that, is your pool cage covered? How is it covered? Because companies do that differently. I mean, some cover the cage and the screens. Some depreciate for the cage. Some don't. You want to make sure you have replacement cost on your personal items. In the event you obviously have water intrusion into your home. And you want to make sure you have the correct amount of insurance, because if you are underinsured, that can actually cause what's called a co-insurance penalty. So you want to make sure you have enough insurance on your policy.
Okay, and the next question I have is, okay, we have contracts out there, or other realtors do have contracts out there. Should a person bind their contract when they do the sales contract once they, get an insurance quote from somebody, or wait till a day or two before closing? Well,
in the event you have a closing, obviously with a lender, you want to bind the policy effective the same day as your closing, because that is when your legal ownership and interest in that property starts.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when you want to do it. You don't want to wait until after the fact. I mean, perhaps you get to it a week later, you might be okay, but certain carriers have different requirements on lapses. So for example, if you call in 31 days after you purchased your house, you really limit yourself into what carriers are going to offer you coverage. So you absolutely want to do it the day of your closing.
Okay, yeah, so just explain that a little bit better, okay? Is
Yeah.
that when I do a contract, I always give them people's names for insurance, okay?
Mm-hmm.
They should not wait till 2 or 3 days before closing to bind it, right?
Right, you
Right.
typically, correct.
Try and bind it earlier than later. And the reason I tell them is that, it's better to have it binded than waiting, because, rates could go up. We could have a hurricane. So in that situation, when we have a hurricane coming, we see one coming that's out there in the ocean. What happens in that case?
Well, yeah, and to your point, I mean, you don't necessarily want to wait to the last day. If you have
Right.
a mortgage, it's not going to happen.
I
They'll
know, I was
request
just
it early.
kind of...
But in the event of, it's different. Out of hurricane season, it's much easier to wait to the day. In hurricane season, so what happens is, as they are approaching, carriers will begin to shut down, and they will base on when they start shutting down, meaning we're not going to bind any new policies, and they take coordinates, and they'll take coordinates in the Atlantic and the Gulf.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as these storms reach that point, they will start shutting down. Now, they'll typically give us maybe 24-hour notice. Hey, effective 6 p.m. tomorrow night, we're not binding anymore. But that's typically what happens. Now, because of that Irma hit us, there is Hurricane Maria out there now. And even though forecast not to make any impact Florida at all,
Right.
there are certain carriers that have already shut down because of the situation that just
With
happened
Maria.
with Irma. Yeah.
Okay, and how about afterwards? How long does it take for them to start writing policies afterwards?
Depends on the extent of the hurricane and where it hit.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, Irma hit directly here.
Right.
So a lot of carriers have yet to open back up. Some of them have. Now, in the event, let's say that Irma would have hit up north in Jacksonville, our counties probably would have reopened the following day or two after it was gone. But now, slowly but surely, they are allowing new business, but some have not opened, and in fact, some are being much more restrictive of homes with lapses now. Even those that used to all automatically write you with the lapse, there are some now that are actually not offering coverage, which that may change in the future, but currently not right now.
Well, Chris, we're going to take a little short break here, and I got about 3 more questions for you here that I think our viewers are going to really like. So we'll be right back.
Thinking of buying a home located in a golf course community in the Naples, Marco, Bonita, or Estero, Florida? Here is what Mark Lai, former PGA winner, says about Realtor Michael York of the York Real Estate Group of Downing Frye Realty.
Hi, I'm Mark Lai. If you have any real estate needs in Naples, Florida, the one company to contact is the York Real Estate Group. Also, if you want a golf course property to invest in, Michael York of the York Real Estate Group is the guy to contact. Michael knows every golf course in Naples. I will tell you this, he's been in the golf business for a long time. He's played all the great golf courses down here, and he is an outstanding realtor. I've known him for quite some time, and he's he's got a lot of integrity, and he very much knows his stuff on all the different clubs here in Naples. So the York Real Estate Group is a great place to start. So if you have any time or anybody that wants to visit down here in Naples and look at the options out there, please contact the York Real Estate Group.
Welcome back. Chris, I know when my clients shop around for insurance, it's just normal that, they're shopping rate, but they really don't understand the coverage, which most people don't.
Yeah.
It's kind of complicated. It's like signing the papers on a mortgage, right? You've got all these papers you just sign.
Above my pay grade.
Right. What's my payment, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So just explain for the viewers what they should be looking at when they're shopping around, not just rate, but the carriers, the ratings, what kind of coverage they're going to have.
Yeah, and this, situations like this really kind of reemphasize how important it is to do that. When you're looking at a policy, and most people are, everyone's price sensitive to a certain degree,
Right.
And sometimes it works out where, the best carrier is offering you the best premium with the best coverages. Okay, that does work out sometimes. But, most of the time when you're looking at a policy, you want to look at several things. You want to make sure that the amount of insurance that you have on the policy isn't necessarily the sale price. It needs to be the price of the reconstruction cost of the home,
Right.
which most of the time are different, and sometimes significantly different.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure that you obviously have wind, hurricane coverage, and you want to check the deductible amount. You want to again look at pool cage coverage. You want to ask about your personal property. Is this at replacement value? And what that means is, if Hurricane Irma completely destroyed your home and they had to buy you furniture and clothes and appliances, those types of things, are they going to buy it to you brand new? That's if you had replacement costs, that's what would happen. Otherwise, they'll depreciate all those things.
Is that part of the deductible, your personal items?
Yes,
It is?
Yes, it all depends on the cause of the loss. So, when a hurricane comes through, you have that percentage deductible in most cases.
It's everything in
Yeah,
the
that's
house.
right. It's everything. Yep.
How about your car?
Your car would be on your auto policy under comprehensive coverage if you have that. So you want to make sure you have that.
Okay, for flooding of the car or whatever. How about if you're driving down a road that's flooded and
Well, if
fries the engine, which I've seen,
That's typically not covered by insurance if you just choose to drive and you're going in deeper areas. It's possible. You can't say 100% sure, but typically it is in the event of the flood has actually flooded your engine completely and you weren't out, driving around, right?
Okay, because there's been a lot of questions about that too.
Yeah.
What is covered under flood? Regular flood and hurricane? Can you tell us the difference?
Yeah. So in Florida, the vast majority of policies don't have flood insurance. Now there are some that do. Carriers have started writing private flood, but 95% of the time it isn't. And what flood is defined as, it is defined as 2 or more acres of normally dry land or 2 or more homes on normally dry land that are flooded. And that is, of course, a storm surge from a hurricane is considered flood, not hurricane. And rising water due to the rain from the hurricane is considered flood.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Now, flood only has 2 coverages on the policy. That it has your dwelling and your personal property. Now, the personal property on a flood policy, it's always at actual cash value. You can't do anything to change that. But on the dwelling itself, there are 3 factors it has to meet, and it'll be replacement cost. But in the dwelling, you have some things like appliances, et cetera, that are included in that. But it's something we recommend to every customer. And this storm actually has obviously put an emphasis on how important it is, because in flood you have several different zones. And
That's right.
lenders will require you to carry it in certain zones, okay? And then there are other zones they don't. And we've seen flooding in both. There have been areas that you wouldn't think would ever flood, they've flooded, and then vice versa, you've got it in the higher hazard where they've got a foot of water. And when flood water hits your home, does a tremendous amount of damage. At least it's typically, a lot of times it's wastewater.
That's
so
right.
it's not clean water.
Right.
So you have to do a lot of additional things to have your home repaired.
The other question I have is should they file a claim if it doesn't meet the deductible or not?
Well, with hurricanes, it's not quite the same as if, let's say, a non-hurricane claim. Let's say you have a little bit of a water loss.
Mm-hmm.
That's more of a discussion to have. If you have damage to your hurricane, let's say you've got very minor damage, such as screens on a pool cage going out. In that instance, you probably don't necessarily really need to file the claim.
Right.
Now, if you have that and you have maybe a leak somewhere, maybe you have some stucco damage, maybe the cage itself has been pushed, window damage, anything like that, it's really advisable to probably go ahead and file the claim, because it is not considered a negligible claim. In other words, it's an act of God, so they don't look upon that as something you caused, so it's not going to go against you. And the deductible on most hurricane policies is a calendar year deductible, which means that, let's say you have a $5,000 deductible, you file this claim, and it comes up with $4,000 in damage. If another hurricane hits in this same hurricane season, which we've got almost 2.5 months left,
Right.
then you'd only have $1,000 left on that deductible, and then it would kick in. So, it's for a hurricane claim. I mean, most of the time, if you get any kind of question on the amount of damage, you're probably better off filing the claim.
And how does this affect insurance companies with rates and everything?
Well, we don't know that yet, but after 04 and 05,
Right.
with those tremendously bad hurricane seasons, a lot of insurers realized they were called rate inadequate and realized they perhaps didn't carry enough of reinsurance, which reinsurance are insurance policies these companies have
Right.
that are triggered in the event of these storms for hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in coverage. So the last 10 or 12 years, Florida rates have been going up.
Mm-hmm.
And the hope was that this was to obviously combat current costs, but also to get to a point where if this happens again, which we live in Florida, it's
Right.
going to, that they would be more prepared. So hopefully the rates don't change too much. And with certain carriers it may not change much, and with others it may go up quite a bit. But there are other options. And the other thing it's going to depend on is it's going to make insurance companies look at how many homes they insure in each zip code and area. And that could affect what they write going forward.
Well, Chris, I appreciate you coming in with this busy time for you, and I know you've helped our viewers here, and again, I'd like to thank you.
Yeah.
Look
thanks
forward
for
to
having
doing
me.
business with you.
Yep.
Thank you.